I've been a middle school history teacher for 17 years, and if there's one part of the job I can't stand, it's the living history assignment we give out at the end of each school year. The idea is for students to interview their grandparents, recording their oldest memories to preserve for posterity, and to give the kids an easy way to bump up their grades. This year was no different. When I collected the projects, I figured they'd be the same dull stories I've heard 100 times. I only owned 2 pairs of pants when I was your age. Or, my brother got beat with a newspaper for hitting a baseball into a neighbor's yard. I was prepared for another tedious night. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down to go through the projects. As usual, they were peppered with well-meaning but painfully outdated remarks that were so sexist or racist that you had to laugh just to get through them. One project stood out that night, submitted by a girl in my class named Olivia. She was quiet, pudgy, and an average B student. Nothing about her ever struck me as remarkable. She had turned in 2 discs for some reason, so I started with the one labeled Interview. The video opened with a shaky, grainy image of a cluttered living room, a hoarder's nightmare. Olivia was curled up in an armchair, clutching a notebook. Across from her sat a man with a stern expression, smoking a cigarette. A woman behind the camera whispered, "Go ahead." And Olivia, looking like a scared rabbit, began in a small voice. "I am here with my great-uncle Stephen. He is going to tell us about his oldest memories from being in the army." Uncle Stephen didn't look thrilled to be there. Olivia read directly from the suggested questions I'd given to the class, and he answered curtly, his replies punctuated by long drags of his cigarette. Every so often I'd hear her mom whisper, "Speak up, Olivia," from behind the camera. It was all typical, boring stuff, until Olivia set down the notebook and went off script. "Did you like being in the army?" she asked. "Nope," Stephen wheezed. "Glad to get out of my town, though." "Where did you go?" she continued. "Balkans," he replied. "Was Balkis very different from here?" she asked, clearly unfamiliar with what or where the Balkans were. But there was something earnest in her curiosity. "Yes," he said, a little more forthcoming now. Then Olivia asked, "Uncle Stephen, what is your very worst memory from the army?" That's when the tone changed. Stephen crushed his cigarette into the ashtray, pushed himself up from his chair, and muttered, "I'll be back." The screen went dark. When the video resumed, the living room looked the same, but Stephen had laid out several pieces of paper in plastic sleeves on the cluttered coffee table. He held one in his hand. He began, "I was a kid when I enlisted, your brother's age," he told Olivia, who nodded. "I never saw combat. My unit was assigned to a school that had been destroyed by the war. Broken windows, caved-in rooms. It had been like that for years, and no one had lifted a finger to fix it," he went on, painting a bleak picture of a city in ruins, and then paused. "In the basement, I found this letter," he said, lifting the paper. "I didn't know what it said, but I had a buddy of mine translate it. I'm going to read it now, and then I'll tell you what I saw in that basement." A chill ran down my spine as he started to read the letter aloud. It was from a man named Stanislav, a janitor who had lost his wife and baby to illness amidst the chaos of war. He described his heartbreak, his isolation, and how he found solace in his radio, a constant companion that kept him tethered to a world beyond the violence around him. The letter grew darker. Stanislav wrote about his obsession with the radio and his despair when it finally went silent. He could no longer cope, and by the end of the letter, he was ready to take his own life. "I have closed the door to this room and stuck a chair beneath the handle. If anyone is kind enough to come looking for me, please, save my radio. It did not deserve to die in its sleep," he wrote. When Stephen finished reading, Olivia had tears in her eyes. "What did you find?" she asked, voice trembling. But before Stephen could answer, the video cut out. My heart pounded. What had he seen? I remembered the second disc. It was unmarked, but I hoped it contained the rest of the story. There was no video, only audio. Olivia's voice came through first. "Hi, Miss Garrity. I'm sorry about my mom, but she refused to record the rest of what my uncle was saying, but I asked him to continue and secretly recorded the story as a voice memo on my phone." There was a pause, a deep breath, and then she continued. "But everyone's history is important, even if they are sad, pathetic people, and even if they never won a single thing in their life. I haven't slept through the night since I finished this project, but you have to hear what my uncle has to say." After a tense moment, Stephen's gravelly voice picked up again. "The letter had a date on it," he said. What date? Olivia asked. It was dated 2 weeks before we started rebuilding the school. But didn't you say the school had been destroyed 2 years ago? Yes, he replied quietly. It had been. Stephen's voice took on a haunted tone as he described what he'd found in that basement. Stanislav's body, hanging but still remarkably lifelike. And the radio, it was still on. Like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more.